Thank you for joining us on another one of our weekly lives. I am excited to get started on the new application cycle for those who are looking to really make sure that you're ready to have a successful application round. I'm sure you've heard the conversations in the forums and communities that talk about how the applications in this past round had increased more than anticipated. So definitely want to make sure that you are doing all that you can to prepare and submit a really strong application when you choose to apply. So today we're here to talk about the red flags in your MBA application or in your MBA profile. And primarily I'm going to focus on the flags that you are not necessarily that are not necessarily talked about that often in the MBA community. I'm sure that they're talked about more privately, but not so much in forums online. So with that, I know you're joining us from various different platforms. If you are joining us through our Instagram, please write your questions down. We'll answer those at the end of the session, and any of the other forums as well. Just write your questions in the chat, and we'll answer those once I'm done with the presentation. If you are new to our channel, we host every single week a topic related to, or a live video or a live event focused on a topic related to the MBA application, related to supporting applicants through this process. So if you're going through this journey, you know someone who's going through this journey, I invite you to subscribe to our channel, follow us, and like these videos, because it does help us make sure that we're providing content that is relevant to you and that you find useful in this process. So with that, why don't we get started? As usual, I have a few slides prepared, and we can talk more. We go through each one of those, and then we'll come back to questions that come through the forums online, as well as those that have come through the registration. So a little bit about me for those who are new. I am the founder of C Admissions, which is a boutique admission coaching firm focused primarily on helping candidates tell their story to admission teams. This is focusing really on understanding the people that I work with, understanding their backstory, and then being able to weave those pieces together to show a cohesive story that is interesting to the admission committees. I have a 94% placement rate, which means 94% of my clients gain admission to at least one of their target institutions through this very a rigorous process that we go through to make sure that you are ready. And of course, at the end of the day, there's components that you can control, as in what you put out there, and then there's components that you cannot control, which is who you're competing against, those components. But I'm of the belief that you do all that you can to make sure that you stand out, and then leave the rest to the universe to open doors. So today my focus is going to be on looking at the evaluation criteria for business schools, what they look for, what are some of the numbers that you are competing with as far as the metrics are concerned, common red flag and undiscussed red flags, and then the Q&A is going to be towards the end. So let's dive right in. So what are schools looking for in applicants? So when they're evaluating a candidate, they're looking at the academic performance. I mean, this is at the end of the day an academic institution that you are or these are academic institutions you're applying to. So academics matter a lot. They're also looking at your standardized test scores. So that's the GMAT, the GRE, and in some cases, the executive assessment for those schools that do accept the executive assessment. If you're in the process of taking the test, just make sure that you are not limiting yourself by focusing on the EA, the executive assessment, because not every full-time MBA program accepts that. They look at your goals and their feasibility. They look at your professional progress, so promotion and growth, community engagement, of course, and the overall character. When you hear business schools talk about the holistic application review, this is what they're really talking about: the comprehensive, different components, the comprehensive aspect of who you are as a candidate that they're evaluating. So let's talk about some of the numbers that you are competing with, right? So this is the easiest way to determine, are you competitive or not? And we're looking at top 20 business schools with 3.55 GPA on average, 723 in the classic edition of the GMAT, 324 in the GRE, and about 5.4 years of work experience. The M7s have about 5 years of work experience, which means that they're a little bit younger than the average. So these are numbers that you want to quickly just look at and understand and see where you stack up against these numbers. This is your initial filter of what how your profile compares to the rest. And if there is anyone in here where you're below, something else needs to be better in order to compensate for compensate for the lower scores, and obviously make you competitive. So common red flags are, of course, the GPA. You hear this oftentimes. The GPA is unfortunately also something you can't control, so you can't go back in undergraduate and change that. But what you can do is look at your GMAT or GRE and retake if your GPA is below class average. Your GMAT or GRE should be above the class average to, again, compensate. Communication is something that's really important. That comes through in your written material. So writing is important, as well as your communication during interviews and communication with, of course, other people in the institution. So those are important elements. Leadership experience is something that oftentimes people don't, they understand that it's something that schools evaluate, but they'll know exactly what it looks like for someone with 5 years of work experience post-undergraduate, because it's not a leadership in a traditional sense, as in like you're leading teams of people, right? This is more leadership focused on what you have accomplished, how you take on projects, how you show up. Have you received promotions? Have you taken on leadership that's beyond your job title? Those are the components of leadership. And if you don't have that, then it's important to use this time to effectively prepare. And if you do, you want to make sure that you are communicating this effectively. Again, going back to communication, it's absolutely integral in order for you to showcase the admission team. This is, I know when people, I know when people apply to jobs, they, put in so many applications out there, and they might not always, customize their presentation of themselves in a way that makes sense. This is not something that you want to do in applications. You're going to apply to about 5 to 6 schools, and you want to make sure that everything is customized, everything is really focused on and speaking about how you can add value to an MBA classroom, how you're going to find success in the future and have success in the future, in order for you to maximize output of energy, efforts, all of that, you absolutely need to have strong written communication of your leadership experiences and what you have been able to accomplish, of course. This other component is something of a red flag, it's actually quite a big red flag for admission teams, because, and that's, of course, the no career progression. Typically, if they're looking at candidates with 5 years of work experience, they want to see that in that 5 years, you at least had one or a couple of promotions in that period of time. And if you're showing up without any of those, without career progression, it becomes a red flag. The admission team is going to look at it from the perspective of, well, do your supervisors, the people that are in charge in the communities that you are a part of, do they not see you as someone who has the potential to grow? And this is something that you want to really pay close attention to. And there are definitely ways that you can improve in the coming months to make sure you are submitting, again, an application that's reflective of your potential. And now let's get into the not so commonly discussed red flags. So perhaps this first one is something that I do talk about quite a bit in my communities where I share insights about the MBA application. But a lack of clarity in career goals is one of the most important components that when it comes to communication that MBA applicants must go through. And what I mean by that is you need to have a very clear understanding of where you're going. It has to be ambitious but attainable, and you need to have very clear direction of where that is leading. And it obviously has to be something that is not going to be a 1% chance, right? A 1% chance, I don't think you would bet on it, and for certain the admission team will not bet on a 1% chance, right? So you want to make sure that you have clarity of goals and clear direction of where you're going, and obviously seeing how the MBA is going to be an important tool in your toolkit to make sure that you're succeeding. This is something that it's for most people, it's not something that you can clearly articulate in 5 minutes. It's really something that takes time to research and to fully understand. You need to embody the vision that you are presenting to the admission team, and you need to understand the market that you are going into. So this is a very, very important process, and this is more of the qualitative component that it will show up in the way you speak about your goals, and the way you connect with people, and the way you the confidence that you have. I always believe that if you don't believe it yourself, no one's going to believe you. So if you're going in with a half-baked goal, it's not going to be something that anyone is going to, especially those who are making important decisions in the admission process, they may not be fully convinced that you are ready for an MBA program. And you want to use this time to make sure that you have done your self-reflection of what you want to do and be able to communicate and articulate that effectively and with confidence to the admission team. Another component, another red flag that happens to be in the MBA application process is very weak letters of recommendation. So oftentimes applicants rely on the recommender to write the letters of recommendation with an understanding that they know their career. The reality is that your supervisors, who are typically the individuals who are going to write letters of recommendation, have managed other people as well. And they also may or may have not written letters of recommendation before. And particularly, we need them to understand what the MBA process looks like. So if they haven't done this previously, they may write a well-intended letter of recommendation, but if it doesn't capture what business schools are looking for, it's not detailed enough, then that is going to be a huge red flag for the admission team, because they will see it as not that this recommender doesn't know what to write in the letter recommendation, but rather they don't believe in you and your ability for future success. So you want to make sure that you're doing your part in having strong letters of recommendation. That means making sure you have clearly communicated to those individuals, as well as clearly prepared them to write letters of recommendation that are effective and help you get in. This typically also requires time. So all of these components is not something that you will decide, like I have 1 month and all of this can be done. There is a lot of components that are needed in the application process that require more than 1 month of work time, and you definitely want to start working through these as soon as possible, because there are other components of the application that will be required later down the line. The other red flag is an over-reliance on brand. So what do I mean by that? There are applicants who sometimes look at the brands of the institutions they've been a part of. So whether that's undergraduate institution or professional experiences, and assume that that's enough for them to showcase that they are successful. And don't get me wrong, brand obviously makes a huge difference because they recognize what the work looks like in those kinds of environments. However, if you are not able to showcase how your contributions have made an impact in that community, then that's not going to be strong enough of an application. So you really want to be able to make sure that you are communicating what your contributions are, that are beyond just the brand, just relying on the brand itself. And also remember that if you are working for a brand name institution, which means that there's a lot of employees there, and also means that there are a lot of applicants applying with the same brands as you, you want to be able to differentiate your application from your peer who is, 2 cubicles down the line, who's also applying to these business schools. So how do you do that? Is by reflecting, taking the time to really capture what your impact has been, what your contributions have been. That will come through in your essays, in your letters of recommendation, in your resume, in the way you speak about your experiences. It is weaved into your entire portfolio, which is your experiences that you're going to be submitting to the admission team. Consistency is important, right? You are, at least the applicants that are typically on my profile are ones who are targeting top 20 business schools, which means that there are a lot of high achievers around you. What that means is that you need to make sure that you are putting a lot of attention in your application. High achievers have a tendency of also being perfectionists, which not all, of course, maybe perhaps a little bit generalizing there, but you want to make sure that there's consistency, and lack or inconsistency typically speaks to not paying attention or not really valuing something that you're doing. And obviously admission teams who have more applicants than there are seats in the program are able to filter out those who have, inconsistent information in their application. Self-awareness is something that everyone talks about, but no one really talks about at the same time. Self-awareness is really an understanding of where you are and what your accomplishments have been, what have you succeeded with, but also where is it that you're going, and understanding what do you lack. What are the things that you need to develop in order to get there? This typically also requires reflection, but then you need to take it one step further. It's not just where my weaknesses are or where are areas that I need to develop, but you also need to now look at the future. Where is it that you're going to get those experiences, and how do you plan on getting them? Important component for business schools is that they will not handhold you in this process. They will have many opportunities for you to essentially get access to the things that you need, but you have to be the ones who takes the step to get the things that you need in your professional development, which means that you need to be self-aware of what you need, right? That is a component that you want to make sure that you are effectively reflecting throughout any conversation or any communication that you have with the target representatives of the business schools that you are applying to. Unrealistic, 2 more, and then we'll move to questions. You have unrealistic expectations or entitlement. I sometimes hear stories of applicants being at top-ranked business schools where they expect that they're going to be getting the McKinsey, the private equity, the really tough jobs just because they're attending that institution. And that is a level of entitlement that it's not really valued in business schools and in the application. So you really want to be humble in this process. So make sure that you understand that there is a level of ambition, which is excellent, but there's also a level of pragmatism that you need to combine in order to be successful in your application. And then the final thing that I want to talk about is a potential red flag is a lack of genuine interest in business. There are applicants sometimes who are talking really about how they want to attend this institution, which comes across sometimes as that is the end goal of having a Harvard or Wharton or Kellogg or Booth or MIT or any one of these schools on their resume. Which of course it's a great thing, but you need to demonstrate that you have an interest in business. And the way you do that is from your past experience. How have you showed and demonstrated interest in the businesses that you've been a part of, but also in the future, how are you seeing business as a value and as an impactful space for you to be able to contribute and be of impact in the greater communities that you're a part of. So these are all components, and if we look at the common thread across the board, it requires reflection, it requires time, and requires a level of confidence in your in demonstrating your abilities in order to effectively get to these top 20 business schools. It's not just numbers, which I know we often hear about. I need this, 750 classic edition GMAT to get in. And yes, of course, that makes a difference, but it's not the only thing that gets you in the program. I have plenty of stories that I can share where excellent GMAT scores did not mean actual admission. So if you want to talk about your profile and how we can support you in this process, please reach out. We do have a complimentary 30-minute conversation with me where we talk about your profile, what you're looking for, probabilities, of course, and then also we talk about how I can support you through this process and if we're a good fit. That's really important because I see working with individuals one-on-one as a partnership throughout the entire journey. So with that, let's dive into questions. If you have questions, please write them in the comments. And I will be just checking my Instagram page so that I can see if there's any Instagram messages that have come in. And I don't see it. Okay. So why don't we go with questions that have come in through the registration. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the moment. Okay, what strategies can I use to enhance my application despite having an average GMAT score? Your application, it's really going to be something that you're going to focus on in showcasing how you have made contributions in the work and the parts in the communities that you've been a part of. So if your GMAT score is average, average for these top schools is actually pretty good. And then you have to look at obviously what your GPA is. That will also be a contributing factor. But beyond that, to showcase a strong application, it's really having a wonderfully crafted resume that captures your contributions and captures your impact. Also, what's really important is that you are communicating your contributions in the essay format. Your recommenders are speaking to your contributions in their letters of recommendation. They need to be very specific in the application. So really do pay attention to crafting the story in a way that makes sense to business schools. And what makes sense is also dependent on where you're going as well, and what your experiences have been. So I would say I would need more information, obviously, to give you more detailed advice, but at least in this particular way, you can start really paying attention to your resume, which is industry or business school agnostic, and also crafting your goals, because those are really, really important. Next question is, what advice can you give to help me overcome the gaps in my profile, considering I don't have a standout background? Individuals, I mean, this depends a little bit on where you're going and what schools are you targeting, and what the rest of your application looks like. But areas, again, where you want to highlight is really showcasing what those gaps are, addressing them head on. Don't make excuses in your application. You just want to address them, and what lessons did you learn from those experiences that you've had, but then focus primarily on the strengths, the areas where you can bring value and add value. Part of this process is mindset. And actually, we'll be talking about mindset later in April. So go to our events website. So cadmissions.com/events. And you can look at some events that we'll be hosting. And one of those events at the end of April is going to be focused on mindset. Mindset is really important, because if you see yourself as only someone who has gaps, then that's going to be reflected in how you talk about your experiences in your application. You do need to be able to address the gaps. Obviously, you never ignore them, but you do need to be able to see the positive in your experiences in order for the admission team to also be able to see the positive in your experiences. This is not a time when you are extremely modest, which I know a lot of cultures, including my own, have been taught to do. It's really a time when you really think about how you add value to an MBA program. Okay, what are effective strategies to mitigate low GPA in my MBA application? The only way to mitigate low GPA is to have an exceptional GMAT score or above average GMAT score. And above average is very difficult because the averages are so high. So that's one way that you can do it. The other way you can do it is taking classes. So Harvard Business School has a core program, CORE, that's 12 to 17 weeks of training. It's very intensive, but it's pre-MBA preparation, and it's really respected by all business schools. So that's another way. If you complete that, you get the certificate that says yes, you completed the program. That can be something that helps you with your GPA, especially if you're not a really good test taker. But your GMAT is an important player in this game. Okay, last question. What steps can I take to ensure my letter recommendation strongly reflects my professional relationships and competencies? Letters of recommendation do require actually quite a bit of attention. And what I mean by that is not just being able to identify the right person to write your letter recommendation. I do have on my YouTube channel quite a bit on the topic of letters of recommendation, who you choose. So you can definitely go there after this. But what I will say is, you want to make sure that your recommenders are fully aware of what it entails to write a letter recommendation for business schools. This really requires a level of specificity a level that speaks to the value they see in you as a candidate. So you will need to guide them along the way of what they need to write. They meaning the recommenders that you are choosing to write your letters of recommendation for business school. You do need to handhold them through the process. And this is another thing that's added to your plate of things that you will have to worry about in your application process, right? So they need guidance. You also need to make sure that you give them ample time to write letters of recommendation, recognizing that they have other obligations, perhaps family members, perhaps summer vacations. So you want to make sure that you give them ample time to write the letter of recommendation, give them enough guidance, enough details around what they need to write. And then, of course, make sure that you are on top of them to make sure that they're submitting on time. Your application is not considered complete until all the pieces of the application have been submitted, and that includes the letters of recommendation. So it's really imperative that you start this process early to make sure that you also understand what their schedule looks like, because sometimes people are off the grid, meaning they don't have accessible internet because they are taking a very long vacation, and you want to make sure that you understand what those plans are with the timeline that you are targeting for your business schools themselves as well. So with that, we are going to bring today's session to a close. I invite you to join me next week, where I will be talking about the business school selection process. So there is a link here. You can go to, of course, our events page on siaadmissions.com, and you can register for next week's event or any future event that you see that you find interesting. Write your questions in your registration form so that I can have a chance to answer those questions, whether you watch live or perhaps a replay later on. So with this, thank you so much for joining and for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week.